Welcome to Blue Collar Mystics, the under-the-hood approach to the depths of human consciousness. So many mysteries, so little time, so many big words. That's why we aim to take the mystical and make it practical, usable in your everyday life. And we want to hear from you. We want to hear your story. What happened when you started asking yourself the real questions? Like, who am I? What is this? Is it a hologram? Is this some kind of weird cosmic joke? Hey, these are the questions that we are trying to get to the bottom of as we explore the final rabbit hole together here as Blue Collar Mystics. Is up, Blue Collar Mystics. Spoiler alert, it's a hologram. Oh no, I just sabotaged my own intro. Here we go. I'm really excited today and feeling pretty whimsical, if I'm being honest. And kind of magical too, with this wizard beard kind of growing in. Looking forward to it getting even longer and longer. Eventually, maybe I'll even join like a motorcycle club or something. But I'm really excited. Death metal band, that'd be even better. I start braiding it and stuff. It's like I was saying earlier, like I don't have anything to work with up here. So this is the playground, It's maybe a little bit sloppy, but it is metal. Yeah. I'm super excited today. I have my good friend, Nicole BZ, the anti-business coach, which sounds paradoxical, but I love your approach. I love what you're doing. And I just really am excited to chat with you, catch up and talk about some of this stuff and share what you've been working on with everybody and how they can up their game a little bit, as they pursue whatever it is that they're interested in and try to get their money right and their life right, whatever. We're all trying to improve no matter what level we're at. But I know you have a lot of really cool things going on and to share just really quickly. I'll put all the links in the show notes, but the website or Instagram is Nicole BZ, the BZ channel. And then the website is NicoleBZ.com. So it's because your name's a little bit hard to pronounce, maybe, that you go by BZ. Is that what I
Yeah, 1000%. I couldn't even spell my own name until 10th grade. And it was another Nicole. So the year I was born, Nicole was the most popular name for girls. This was, I guess, before Disney princesses were a thing. And so there were like anywhere from like 8 to 12 Nicoles. I obviously went to public school. And so I would be sitting amongst a bunch of Nicoles, and it was Nicole Salmonson, naming and shaming. We're starting off on a good foot here, who tattled on me and told my teacher that I kept turning my name tag around. I'd also switched schools like quite a bit. And so I was at a new school and I would just like pull my little name card out and turn it around and write my name. And so she tattled on me, and then my teacher made me stay in. And I didn't have the heart to tell her, like, I also don't know if my middle name is spelled with an E or an I, but we're just going to like roll with that. I'm sure at some point I'll see it in writing and like, we'll figure this out. But so yeah, Brant Zawadski is the full surname, which is like kind of a made up thing. My dad actually came over from Poland and his whole family had to scatter for obvious reasons. And so he was a young buck. The story goes, which there have been many stories, but I like this version myself, where he was somewhere between like 8 and 10 years old in, I'm assuming, Ellis Island in New York. And his name was Michał Boleslav Zawadski. And they came up with Michael Nicoles Brant Zawadski. And so the Nicoles is why I'm Nicole, and the Brant Zawadski is why I'm BZ.
That's really cool, though. What a great story. It ties it in very nicely. That's awesome. Yeah. Well, with your upbringing, moving around a lot, how did that sort of affect your sense of individuality as you're coming through? We all have these stories growing up. It's so interesting to me, where it kind of just sets a really interesting frame for our life, how we kind of go from these weird situations in elementary school, middle school, whatever, and then that kind of sets a course for our direction.
Totally. And I mean, just speaking of frame, I have to give you a shout out for that intro. It is epic. And I almost was just like, mic drop, we're done here. Like every time I watch it, it reminds me of your origin story and working in production and entertainment for so long, which is obvious. But I think it's one of those things you integrate so seamlessly. I forget, like, you actually know what the fuck you're doing. So I was born in Northern California, just south of San Francisco, in what is now popularly known as Silicon Valley. At the time, it was just a bunch of like hippie acid heads, aka my parents, like playing with weird technology. And so I spent about 9 years there. And then my family moved down to Southern California and we kind of bopped around until settling. And then I got out of there as fast as I could and kind of like ran away to Europe, which was an interesting story. And then, yeah, I just kind of kept moving around. I've lived in several different states, several different countries, both hemispheres. And depending on which polarization you want to look at.
Sure.
And so it's oddly like, I don't remember my childhood at all, like not really until about being 10 years old. Maybe that was being told you have an actual name and you need to know how to spell it snapped me back into this 3D experience. Right. Until then, I was just kind of like on my own planet doing my own thing. But I think I've never had that sense of like nostalgia that I see like even my brothers having because we moved around so much. I didn't like leave a childhood family home or really have like a hometown. And I've then since moved. I mean, I've probably moved home every 6 months since my 20s, and countries and states. And I mean, I worked in the music industry for a long time and spent a good 10 years just working on the road, which for anyone who has toured, I think everybody after like Almost Famous came out, they were all like romanticizing that lifestyle. And really, it's just like a lot of dirty black jeans and sweaty, smelly band shirts and like grumpy dudes kind of making each other's lives miserable. And I was like, this is so fun. I love this. Everyone's like chain soaking cigarettes being like, shut up. Where's my coffee? So I'm still living like a very gypsy. I've heard that that's like not kosher anymore to use that term. It's probably not kosher to say kosher either. But I feel like because of my heritage, I can claim both. But yeah, I continue to move. I think I'm in a very different place than the last time we spoke. And so I think if I would say like, how did my upbringing affect me now? Being like super open to change, home is where the heart is. And really kind of being able to own like the way that I do things is the way I do things. And that's cool. And like the last time I bought a Forever. Oh, hello?
Nope. I'm still here.
Something very strange just happened.
Okay.
That's so weird.
I can see you fine still and hear you fine.
Sorry.
No, that's cool. You're fine. You're good.
I thought the whole like the internet just went down or something. No. So yeah, I've learned to accept the fact that I'm probably not going to stay in one place physically, geographically for very long. And that's cool. And I should probably stop trying to live like somebody else's definition of what success or commitment or normalcy looks like. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah. So I'm pretty transient myself. Just has been what it is. I've lived in South America for a little while and I've been to Europe. I didn't live there, but I love to travel. And I love that idea of really defining your own success and what that looks like, because it's so easy to kind of fall into this trap, this idea of defining what other people think is success, whatever that is, whether it's financial or what have you. And I've had some experience on the road too, working in that romanticized sort of fashion, which it is fun. There is a lot of interesting personalities that are drawn into that world and absolute characters and amazing people. But it's also a grind and it is very, very stressful. But I imagine that equipped you with a lot of tools for coordinating and like, so what years were you doing music stuff?
Well, so, I mean, I was doing music stuff from like 1998 until 2018. But I was like on the road and touring from about 2000 and to 2013, probably. Yeah. Ish. I mean, time
Sure.
dates. But yeah, it was when, so I was in Australia for the beginning of that. And I had started a recording studio. And then I realized, like, if we want to be able to work with badass bands, the bands that we're working with already need a little bit more sort of notoriety and support. And so I started a record label to help get those bands out there and I mean, essentially like raise the impact of our studio. It just made sense that if people saw, like, I don't know if you remember this joke, but you used to read liner notes
Oh
of
yeah.
like CDs and records, and you'd see like, where was this recorded and who were the players on it and who produced it. And that was sort of like a choose your own adventure path to how like you would find the places and the people that you wanted to work with. So that's why I started the label. I mean, I also just found myself surrounded by amazing artists that I also believed needed better representation. And then I realized, if you want to sell records, these guys need to be gigging and playing. And then I realized, if you want people to show up to the show, then there needs to be some level of like management and coordination. And so it was always just kind of this like reverse engineering of, how do I, like, here's a problem, or what I perceive to be a challenge, and like no one else seems to care or be willing to do anything about it. So I guess I'll just fucking do it. And it was in the management, because I was a foreigner with like zero network and no money. Essentially, I was the one that I was getting in the van and driving everybody around and like getting the gear, or coordinating with other musicians in other towns. Like, can we borrow your gear? Which is a really fun one. And I realized like very, very quickly that me being the person that was like showing up at the venue and shaking hands and meeting people rapidly expanded our success, just from like making friends and like genuinely like loving what I was doing and that sort of adventure. But it, where I thought I could just like sit behind a computer and work all of the time, what I was able to achieve and just like hitting the road for a couple of months was so noticeably different. I was like, fuck, okay, I guess we got to keep doing this. And then, yeah, I just had the opportunity to work with some really cool people who were also really good at touring and the logistics of touring and getting big, like well-known, globally recognized artists. And I had the ability to actually just be on the road and be cool. So that made it easier to just keep doing that. So yeah, I don't know if that even answered your question.
No,
but.
it does. And this is fascinating to me too, especially around this time, right? Because like I was traveling a lot around 2008, 2009, 2010, right? We still didn't really have GPS on our phones yet or any of that. So
Oh
you're
my
coming,
God.
you're starting at 2006. That's even
I'm having
earlier
like
than that.
PTSD flashbacks of a Garmin and like a thing that you would have to get, like touring Europe with no Google
Internet.
Maps
Yeah.
was like a psychedelic experience. But yeah.
I can only imagine, but I love hearing, you talking about taking initiative and networking and getting your feet. Like, it's one thing to be on the computer. We all have that aspect of work that we have to keep up with, but getting actually physically involved, meeting people, shaking hands, that whole thing. It's really interesting to me. And then solving problems in the regular moment as they arise, which is a constant thing, I'm sure, as you're on tour there. But I think that's so important, just taking that initiative and going that extra step, like what is needed. So yeah, I had a thought, like my flashback was like being on a film set, right? And like seeing something is out of place or needs to be fixed and being like, damn, somebody should take care of that. And it's like, well, I noticed it, like I should take, oh shit, that's my job, right? Like as a producer, it's my job. If the generator's out of gas or whatever, like little thing like that, it's like, I need to pay attention to that and take care of that. And it's really easy for us. I think we're just kind of mentally lulled into this sense of everyone's going to do stuff for me and I don't have to worry about it, but to just kind of step back and like see what needs to be done and evaluate it from a really practical perspective, like what needs to happen and start taking action steps towards that. It's great to be able to delegate, but you can't delegate unless you actually know what needs to be done first.
I think it's like, as you're speaking, what I'm being reminded of are these like very poignant moments. And I know like how I found you was this concept of reality transurfing. And so this was like circa 2003, 2004. And I like had just moved to this other country. I was doing what Americans do overseas, which is act like a raging dickhead and being like overly confident and like the loudest one in the room and overcompensating for everything and trying to prove something, and was repeatedly told like, don't just shut up, go away. And so at some point, I realized like I need to just shut the fuck up and learn. And thankfully, like I was balls deep in audio engineering. And so I just like went into that vortex. But when I came out of it, I can distinctly remember being invited to like a New Year's celebration. That was like the height of summer. And I walked into this party and I realized like it's all bands, it's all music people. Everybody knows each other. Like it was like one of those, like it felt like the record skipped and everybody turned to look at me to be like, who? And I had this moment of like, okay, you can turn around and walk away. Like they would literally think you walked into the wrong space. Or like you can create your reality. And you have this opportunity right now, like rather than it happening to you, you get to make it what you want. And that's when like creativity and artistry, because that was one of the beautiful things about getting out of the United States. And I want to talk to you about South America as well, because like it's one thing to be a white person in an English speaking country. It's another to be in a completely different culture, I think. But in Australia, like at least then, most people weren't getting college educations, let alone postgraduate degrees. And so the arts was this incredibly available form of expression and connection and community. And so I'd always pedestalized like artists and creatives. And then I kind of realized like that's what artistry is it's being able to see the world as you think it should be, or see the world like what you want, and also be in the world as it is and have that play in terms of like creation and creativity. And so I, you know, rather than like turning on my heels and walking the other direction, I like clicked my heels 3 times and I was like, you're going to have a fantastic time. Everybody's actually going to like you. Be cool. Like, don't be a dick and just have fun. And by the end of the night, I feel like I had created genuine friends and I had a really just completely like life-changing moment. And I used that template to then actually build this career in music, which doesn't really exist. But there's several moments where I really kind of started to play with what happens when I think and believe it is, and then it like that actually transforms into what I'm experiencing. And like, even as I'm saying it, and this is why like I know people have like their thoughts or whatever on reality transurfing, but I actually do experience it. Like maybe this is because I have my own brain stuff, but like as my like spinal cord like curling up and like lifting up like alien fucking face hugger vibes like off the back of me. And then it's like from that place I can then kind of like zipper it back in, and I'm like in the reality that I want, like the video game that I want to play. Like, and you were kind of talking about that at the beginning. Like, yeah, it's a game and there are rules of engagement depending on the game you want to play, but the whole point is it can be fun and everybody can win, or like where you just don't have to play that game. And so that's like, especially in like business and entrepreneurship and artistry and creativity and trying to sort of balance this creation of what can be and what could be and potentially what should be with like what is. And you've got to have kind of, well, I think you have to have one foot in the old and one foot in the new in order to traverse that gap. It's just this interesting balance, like both and I guess.
Yes. That's good. Yeah.
Thanks.
I like that. The idea of like, yeah, you have one foot planted in reality here, but you're actively, and I've said this probably way too many times, but whatever, it is what it is. The idea of presence is not just surrender to the moment and that's it. Now you're done. The point of presence is so that you can actively influence the future. Because if we aren't able to learn presence now, then you're not going to be able to create anything. So you have to have that foot in the world as it is. But we're also focusing, and I love your idea of reverse engineering. We have that image in the back of our minds, and that we're actively sort of walking to that. And I love kind of how you illustrated it, where we're in this world, this reality, but we have this better idea or a better vision of what we want. And so we're trying to bring those two worlds together. And through a lot of things, a lot of time, potentially, depending, those two things do start to work together. And I think like having some patience, at least, it makes it actually happen a lot faster, because you don't have this sort of extra pressure, right? Like the idea of importance or balancing forces where you're trying to pressure or push super hard. That was one thing that I had to really learn about, was like emotional pressure or expectational pressure on an outcome, and how that actively really sabotages whatever it is that you're trying to do. So as we are learning this process and experiencing it, because it's like something that I think a lot of people talk about, and it's talking about it is one thing, but I think it's really, really, truly, it's a natural process that's happening, and experientially learning it is a little bit different. You're going to have your own nuances, and cues and triggers and ways that you kind of perceive and experience the world that are very unique to you. And other people may not have that same experience. Like you're talking about, maybe like the plate or the plat or whatever they call it, that whole like thing, And so I've talked to several people who have different sort of conceptions of that. It doesn't matter how you experience it, as long as you're, keying in on whatever that technique is and learning to, like put that into practice, whatever it is, which is really awesome. Yeah.
I think it's like, to your point, it's so easy to talk about it, but when you're going through like the waiting period, or like the dip, as Seth Godin calls it, it's fucking hard. And I've worked with artists that have like, that waiting period is a lifetime. I've also worked with people who, seemingly got it. They got, the big break from out the gate, and they've never had a day job. I like patience. It's so funny you bring up patience, and I don't know if that's just like Libra season or what, but I like patience. To me, feels like I'm being punished. Like when I tune into what is that frequency? It's not amazing. Like it's not this like, oh, I'm going to be patient. But trust is like that, again, that reverse engineering of like, this is happening. It's happened. It's done. We're good. So in the interim, what are some things I can think about or invest my energy and focus into, or like, how can I experience what it is I want to experience, even though I'm not perceiving it as being like right here, right now. And like, you always hear people be like, it's the contrast, or like, it's the struggle or the desire or the want, like that shows you like what it is you're working on. It's like, yeah, cool. But in the moment, like the world is on fire, and that like, I can logically and theoretically appreciate that struggle, so that I know what like good feels like, but also like, it'd be really great to just feel good. And so it's like, but like in art, like, cause this is where I feel like with creatives and business owners, anybody who's brave enough, stupid enough to like birth something into reality, like you're going to lose control of it as soon as it becomes real. As soon as you like pull it down from like, that greater groove in the sky, and like give it like physical form, whether you're speaking it into word or like building a product or releasing the thing. We are now like dealing with this construct in this system. And I think that's where we get to really test what works for us. And that's going to be a process of trial and error. Like the amount of failures I've had compared to the amount of success I've had is like a staggering, overwhelming, suffocating amount of fucking failure. And like, it's like that non-attachment, the story that you're telling yourself. This is how I experience it, at least. is I'll have, you know, a disagreement with somebody, or something won't go the way that I wanted, or something is taking a fuck ton longer than I wanted to. And it's like, okay, well, what's the story I'm telling myself about that? And usually it's like, it's my fault. I suck as a human. Like nobody likes you. Everybody hates you. Go eat worms. But what I remember, like, that's just a make-believe story I told myself, and, you know, I absorbed from a lot of other sources as a way of motivating myself, because that's how we're told to push through, is like bully the shit out of yourself. So it's just like kind of bringing awareness to that broken record and going, okay, yeah, cool. Like, actually, this has nothing to do with my value as a human, or my effectiveness as an artist, or if I'm bringing positivity or, you know, impact into this world. Like, it's just not going the way I thought it would. And that's actually really cool too. And like the best things that I've ever experienced or witnessed were a result of it going completely sideways, whether it was just taking the wrong turn, or having a conversation with a random person at a random thing that I hadn't planned on going to. Like, and that's like, especially in terms of business, what I'm working with everybody on right now is we need the plans. Like, we need the systems and the structures and all the boring fucking capitalist, colonialist, white old man bullshit. But it's like, in that structure and system, that like what we're planning on is the thing that's not going on the spreadsheet. And we're using the spreadsheet to make sure that, like, if everything goes tits up, like, we're kind of okay. But it's going to be something that we can't plan on. And that's like it's like attachment to something that doesn't even exist. I don't know. Now I'm just kind of jibber jabbering. But
No, it does seem paradoxical, like a lot of this stuff. And
yeah.
I think I love what you're talking about. You're talking about the dip, Tom Petty's song, "The Waiting is the Hardest Part," just popped in my head. But anything that's worth doing is gonna be hard. Like, I think a lot of people look into manifestation and magic and all this stuff that like it's a get out of jail free card or some magic pill. It's not. It's there's mysticality to it, and there's, you know, getting rid of those limiting beliefs, and yeah, you can do all types of unbelievable, incredible things. But I think a lot of times people don't see, it's like you're talking about how many failures it takes to get to that success. I don't think people realize that enough, because people don't really, they don't really highlight the struggle or the suffering to get to that whole thing. And I think even when you get there, this is something that I personally have had to really accept, is that there's really no getting there. There's really no making it.
Yeah.
Even when I get to the point where I'm like, okay, I've got, you know, I've satisfied that goal. Well, now there's just a new one to strive for. And no matter what, even if I get to work in the industry that I want to work in and do those types of things, there's still going to be, I read some guy's book on creativity, and he's talking a lot about like the sexy work versus the sort of mundane work. And there's still nobody escapes that, he says.
Yeah.
And I tend to agree with that, right? Like, even these people who are celebrities and have all this stuff, they still have to do these special guest appearances or talk at a luncheon or a banquet dinner, right? Like, you know, you could be a comedian and
be on Hollywood Squares.
Yeah. And you still, exactly. Right. Exactly. Right. And so you have to do that kind of stuff. For me, it's like doing audio stuff, and I like it. It's just not as, you know, sexy as, you know, I'm headlining this thing or whatever. Right. Like, so even just understanding that and accepting it in advance, and the whole idea of, in Transurfing, he says, take the fortress by lengthy siege. Like, talking about that patience and not putting that pressure. I think that it's a really powerful frame to kind of come from, because you're like, all right, I'm just going to keep plowing through however long it takes. You know, if you do have that vision and you've got that idea, you know, and you've got that contingency plan, right? All mapped out, and the spreadsheets and the, you know, all that kind of stuff. So the contingency's there, and now you can just actively kind of wait for those alternatives to form, and then start choosing your path a little bit at a time. But I think it's good to not give up, but give up on the expectation.
Yeah.
So that energy like releases from you, and you don't have that sort of constricting and constraining you.
Well, it's like, as the prophet Jay-Z said, "More money, more problems."
That's right.
That's my thing with manifestation. And I see this, like, I've been working with some of my people for years. And so I've gotten to watch this whole roller coaster. And it's like, is the expectation that you'll get to a point where there won't be any challenges or stress or problems anymore? And it is. And I don't know where that came from. I've certainly never thought in my entire life that I would get to a place where, like, we're good here.
Mhm.
So that's kind of my struggle with, like, the, light and lovers languaging, is that you could get to this, like, baseline of just bliss. And it's beyond the, just like, without the contrast, we wouldn't know what bliss even feels like. It's beyond that. And that's where, like, with goal setting, the way I like to approach it is that, like, we're just picking a target so that we see, like, where we land, because that's how we learn. Like, first and foremost, did we even want the damn thing?
Right.
So often, and you hear everybody who's, like, got money and privilege and influence and, like, all the things that, like, you might be perceiving, like, and wishing and wanting, complaining about, like, oh, you don't think you don't know what it's like, and it's not what you think it is, and this doesn't solve all your problems. And you're like, yeah, but, like, putting my bills on auto pay would be, like, fucking awesome too.
Mhm.
So, like, I think for me, it's like, we set a goal not to achieve it, but to understand, firstly, do we even want this? Secondly, like, how the hell did we get here? Was it easier than we expected? Harder than we expected? What were the, like, daily actions? And importantly, like, how did I feel on each day working towards this? Because I know on the days where I'm, like, working my fucking ass off and, like, pushing myself, and it's hard and it's, like, gross, and I get to the end of it and I'm like, sweet, you did it, like, check, like, the work sucks and the results are like, ugh. But on the days where I told myself I was going to take a day off, and, like, I go for a hike and I come back and I'm like, maybe I'll do like some work, and then the thing that I've been putting off and avoiding just, like, magically gets done, and it's amazing and everybody loves it, and it wasn't even part of the plan or on the spreadsheet. Like, that's what's really helped me with my own goal planning, is, like, my ego and my, masculine, or how the fucking internalized misogyny that I'm doing, whatever. I'm actually, like, really happy in my masculine, but, like, loves a good planning day. And when I get super stressed out, I do the fucking 10-year plan and, like, the to-do list, and, like, I get all my subscriptions in order and, like, my budget in place. And then, like, within minutes, I completely forget that even happened, and I throw it all out the window, and I get to just play in this, like, creative chaos or whatever. And so what we're doing is, like, trying to create this blueprint for ourselves, because we're always going to have problems. We're always going to have challenges. It doesn't matter, like, how much success we, like, can put on the board and how high on the ladder we get. Like, the ladder just keeps going up. And so when you can understand, like, how you work, and, like, especially with that creative process, one of my favorite, and I talk about this heaps, so I'm definitely repeating myself, but Stephen Pressfield, who wrote The Artist's Journey and The War on Art, firstly, like, his writing is fucking brilliant. And, like, I am creating a reality where I can write like that. But secondly, when he talks about in The War of Art, when his publishers challenged him to write that book, and it was right off the back of one of his most public, massive failures, when he was trying to get into screenwriting and Hollywood, and he'd worked on this, like, massive, Hollywood picture, and it just flopped. And then he's being asked to write this, like, how to, personal development, like, genius guides to all the beginners. And it, like, his ego and his brain was just telling him, like, who the fuck do you think you are? Like, you are fraud with a capital F, RAUD. Like, you were the last person that should be writing this book. And it was that book that was actually his pivotal point into becoming, like, one of, the most published writers and influential writers of his time. And, like, he's pretty old. I don't know how old he is, but, like, to be, like, at the top of your game at, like, 70 and still being able to live in a, like, he talks about, he's got this ritual for his writing. And unlike Joan, I forget what her name is, who is incredibly, like, writes from, like, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, he approaches it like getting into the, like, creative muse. And I love thinking about it this way, because he recognizes like there's some ritual, aka some repetition, some patterns, some daily habits, like whatever word you want to use for it, that he taps into. But he always gets going around the same time, which is 10 in the morning. He's not fucking killing himself. And it takes him a minute to get in there. And so he's just kind of got to start. And then the momentum starts to build. And then he gets that hit. And it's there for as long as it's there. And when it's gone, he doesn't beat himself up over it. You know, he closes up his journal and puts his lucky writing jacket back on the chair and he goes. And sometimes he gets 2 hours, sometimes he gets 6 hours, not usually more than that, but it's a daily practice. And it's like this commitment to his art. It's not the discipline and showing up or the like pushing through even when you don't want to do it. It's just like, I'm playing this game and I play this game every day because it's the game I want to play. And there's no expectation. There's no definition of success or failure. It's just something I'm going to do. And when it stops feeling good, I'm going to stop doing it. And so I like that. Like he's figured out his own blueprint. And I think that's what's really important because like some days are going to suck and some days are going to be fucking magic. And how you approach that, I think is like how you get to the other side of that dip and the other side of expectation and like attachment and even ego about how this should look or feel. And you're just kind of giving yourself the place to like, and the space to play.
Yeah. I love his book. The War of Art is, I haven't read the other one, but that one just blew my mind. The
artist's journey is really good. It's because it's a comment on the artist's journey as the heroes, like Joseph Campbell's hero's journey.
Okay. I did the Artist Way last year.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Still do morning pages every single day.
See, that's the discipline or like the discipline. I mean, it is. That's discipline.
It is
devotion as well. But yeah,
well, in Transurfing, he even says something like this, and this stuck with me too, because he's talking about the Muse and how the Muse doesn't just show up whenever. Or maybe she does, and he's feminized the Muse, right? But the idea is that, you know, you go ahead and if you set the table and put all the stuff out and then wait on the Muse to show up, she'll never show up. But if you set the table and you pour the wine and you light the candles and all that stuff, and then you sit down and start to eat, she'll get upset and show up because she wasn't like invited in or whatever. Like anyway, it's not the best metaphor, but the idea is that to go ahead and take that action, whatever that is, in those little small chunks, it's so big. Like for comedy, the biggest thing that they say is stage time, right? That's pushing the needle. What is the thing that pushes the needle forward every single day? What is that one thing that's the most important thing? In comedy, I would argue it's stage time, because you get up there, you say the same shit over and over again. You get tired of saying it, so you write new material out of necessity. Writing is also important, but a lot of people write on stage. Everybody has different processes and things. But I find that for myself, if I can just get in there and get started, that's sometimes the hardest part. I heard somebody say like the hardest part of working out is putting on your exercise clothes or something. For me, it's the squat thrust. But
yeah, I was like, the getting dressed part, I got down.
Like we all just wear workout clothes now. Since
I know it's like it's taking off of the workout clothes that I need to work on.
But I get the point, right? It's just beginning that process. It's just getting that first step in there, and then that momentum can continue to build. And especially if it's taking, consistent
How did you
action.
get on stage? Like, how did you get on stage and do comedy? I'm like obsessed and want to learn, but I have like no idea where to start. So I keep like picking at you.
Yeah, I just tried it. I was like, oh, I'm about to turn 36. I know what I need for my birthday: a bunch of fear and nauseous anxiety,
appreciating community.
Well, just before that, I was working on a movie, and it turned out really good, but I had kind of I had a hard time with it. I worked really hard on it, and some stuff went down that was just kind of difficult. And I talked to a friend.
I remember you telling me about it, and sorry to interrupt, but like, I think it's a really great example of this. Like, you set a goal and you achieve it, and you're like, this isn't what I meant at all.
Exactly. So it was time to say, okay, well, I've come this way, but I want to be over here, And so my friend actually was like, hey, let's just do our own podcast or something. And I was like, all right, let's do that. And so we started writing and for this fun little audio podcast with sketches and stuff like that. So that was really my first entry into actually performing and being on the other side of the camera, or in this case, the audio recording device, in comedy. And I didn't even know comics wrote material. I thought, I was like, I could never do that. These guys are so funny. They just go up there and say this stuff. Wow, George Carlin's brilliant. Or whoever, Bill Hicks. I didn't realize that, you watch his last special, that's 16 years of, him developing these ideas on stage. So once I realized that, I was talking to a friend of mine, Jason Webb, who was talking about writing. And I was like, oh, you don't just write sketches, you write stand-up too. Oh, that makes sense. I want to try this. So I just wanted to try it. I tried it. And ironically, I did pretty good my first time. And then it just got rough. But I started to learn, and I learned a lot about that, the learning curve itself. And, started to fall back into some of those bad habits that people do when they first start something, started to buy some of these mentalities that other people who pursue it have, but also seeing that there's some truth to some of these ideas too, and to just kind of push through and grind through it. For me, I really liked improv, but especially during the pandemic, it was like, well, I'm not going to be able to do improv. I got to have 6 or 7 more people to be able to do improv. So that's kind of out of the question. And I did improv for quite a long time, mostly for therapeutic reasons, but I really enjoyed it. But it's like, well, what can I do myself? I can book me, like I was in bands for years too. And so it's like, everybody's got to, be there at the appointed time. You got to practice, and there's so much to coordinate with it. It's like, hey, are you available Tuesday? I'm like, yes, I'm available Tuesday. I don't have to check with anybody else. There's no, and I'm self-contained. So it was appealing for me for that reason. And if I can build, a fun performance for people, then that's something that I've got in my back pocket, and I can lean on that. And that's something that is an asset, basically, that I can cash in over and over and over again down the road, however long that takes. So that's kind of my, trajectory on that. But yes, it came from Heartbreak. I was heartbroken over that movie. I worked so hard on it, and it came out. It was a #1 Netflix best viewed kind of thing. But just the way that it rolled out toward the end was kind of devastating. And I mean, of course I signed NDAs and stuff. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about that, but just that whole experience, it really did set me up to be like, you know what? I want to take power into my own hands. I don't want somebody from afar who I don't even know who they are, whose jeans cost more than my car, and, living in an ivory tower telling me what to do. It's real easy, for you to tell me to do all this stuff and me to do all your bidding while you have a zero consequence for any of it. I would rather have, both the consequence and the reward. So it really pushed me out there. And that was right when I was putting out Transurfing. That was like 2018. I was putting out the audiobooks and also starting my first Airbnb business, which is really where my entrepreneurial endeavors really actually started to have success. I had tried so many things before that too, but the Airbnb thing was something that actually did take hold, and it gave me a lot of confidence, and it is, propelled me to be able to coach and to get away from the film industry and not necessarily work in it, but still take gigs if I want to, which is cool. And I know that's something that you do too. And I think this is a good kind of spot to talk about maybe your adventure into, working for yourself and kind of what that looked like, from working in the music industry to, shifting over to doing what you do now, starting your own business and helping other people with theirs.
Totally. It's actually interesting, because I wanted to talk to you about the heartbreak that you went through, but that's the perfect segue, because leaving the music industry for me was heartbreaking. And I was I was living a reality I had fantasized about. I never thought I would get to do. Like, I was not just working with a band that is a world-class band and world-class people, but like the whole crew was family. Everyone had known each other the band had all been friends and are still friends. And they'd, been doing that for 15 years. I got to work with one of my best friends, and I was, we were living together and working together, and it was like the absolute dream. And in the music industry, I don't know, you can relate to this, like, it's almost like the mafia. Like you're like in it. And like, I had tried to leave several times. I had been saying since I started working when I was like 19, and back in Boulder, Colorado, for an amazing company as well, that like, this is not my long-term plan. Like, give me a few years, I'll finish up school and I'll figure something else out. And I mean, I said that every year for 20 years. And so what happened at the end of it is I had kicked all the goals. I mean, I'd kicked goals I didn't even know existed. And thankfully I was working with one of my best friends who knows me intimately and had the balls to say, like, I don't think you're happy. And I don't think you've been happy. I think you're making it work. But I think you're done. And like, let that sit with you. I'm not telling you this. I am like, as your friend, having this very honest conversation with you. And I mean, I think I had known that for years. I just had, my identity was so tied into my work, and I'd invested so much into it. I had so much attachment. Like, I was white knuckling the attachment. Also, like, being a band manager of rock stars in LA, like, you realize very quickly who your friends are when you don't have access to anything anymore. So as soon as I made that decision, and it was an incredible, generous opportunity, like generous offering and opportunity, and everything was handled amazingly. I'm probably the only one that didn't handle things well, because I like completely fell apart. And I swore off, like it took me a while to even listen to music again. And I ended up finding work in the cannabis industry in Colorado. A friend of mine had been really, well, no, that's not true. So I had this conversation with my friend. I went back home, got on social media, and I saw a post of a friend of mine who had said that they were having, like, they just discovered like kind of a personal health or cancer diagnosis. And I knew it wasn't going to end well. And I also in that moment knew, like, I could make plans, because I wasn't going to be on the road, nor was I be working with international artists and literally working 24/7. Wow, I bet I could help. And so I reached out to them and just said, hey, I think in a few months I could be there. Also, I've been through this. So if you need support, I'm sure everything's going to be all good, but if you need support, let me know. And they were like, yes, please come now. So I started kind of going back and forth and worked on a couple of different, like, really amazing projects. Definitely thought I was going to be a yoga teacher there for a few months. Got into cannabis. And that was a corporate gig. Like, I was working at like the C-suite level, running a massive corporate company, wearing a suit, passing a bong around a boardroom on the 26th floor. Like, I was just like, okay, reality creation. Like, we
what a
didn't
mix
plan on this one either. And it felt like at that point I kind of had the best of both worlds. Like, I had this really amicable ending to what was an amazing journey, like an experience. And then I was embarking on what felt like this true trailblazing for me. Like, maybe I can be in an office, and maybe I can wear a suit, and maybe I can just switch off and like plug all the way back into the matrix, and like I can be that person who has a mortgage and a 9-to-5, and like we just do the same thing over and over again, and like we've got money and it's cool. No. And so a few months into that, I realized I can't follow the rules like this. And I had a lot of issues with the way, like, the entry level, aka like, I felt like our front facing, our warriors were being treated, the people who were growing and the weed and selling the weed essentially. And they're just being like commodified and just eaten up and spit out. And for like every one person we hired, we fired 2. And so as a leader, I was like, this is not sustainable. And I just couldn't like get the gears into effect. And I felt like I was just spinning my wheels. And so I undertook like a coaching certification just to figure out, like, how can I lead? And obviously an industry I don't have any clout or experience at, with a bunch of boys who I'm like apparently a weird old lady to or something. So just sort of like humbling myself just to knowing whatever I'm doing, it's not working. So why not try to figure out a different way of doing something and study this sort of like executive leadership modality. And in that, you're challenged to start supporting people for practice. So I started mentoring people that I was working with. I reached out to old music people and I was like, hey, so how you used to always ask me for help? Like, would you like that for free? But I can't tell you what to do, because that I think is like the fundamental of coaching is you facilitate a process. It is not your process. And everybody was just like, yeah. So a few months into that, and working with everybody, I was reminded like how fucking heartbreaking entrepreneurship and the creative industry is, and trying to do it your own way, especially when your way is very different than everybody else's way, or you're trying to do something nobody else has done before, or you're trying to do it in a way that nobody else is doing before. Like, it's fucking hard. And most of the time, like, your friends and your family think you're batshit crazy if they haven't already just like given up on you, because you constantly have all these crazy ideas that never pan out, and they think you're just making stuff and like
God, that's so
ADHD
relatable.
or whatever. And so I just was like, oh yeah, like firstly, you have a passion for this and you love it. That's always a good sign. Like if it doesn't feel like work, if you would do it for free, which I was doing at the time, which is how everything I've ever done has started, by the way, is me just doing it for free. And then people are like, can we pay you for this? And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess, like, let's call this a job. So that's how the coaching started. And I never intended for coaching to be like, coaching felt like my form of creative expression and service and support. I left the cannabis industry only because it started to feel like selling drugs, pun intended.
You don't say.
But yeah, like a bunch of just like really disingenuous, like wild west, smash and grab kind of like businesses. And the deeper I got into it, the darker it felt. And I totally believe in like the medicine of cannabis. And I think it's really amazing that we're exploring all sorts of different, like completely different medicines now, from psilocybin to MDMA to, I was hearing like 2GB or some shit. Anywho, I'm here for I'm here for the pharmaceutical expansion. But I was just like, I can't work in this, like as an employee in this like corporate structure. So I started working for myself. I was flipping properties, but I didn't really know that's what I was doing. I was just moving into like ghetto ass places that I could afford and then fixing them up. And then because I can't stay still, I was selling them like 6 months to 18 months later. Or I'd just like let my friends rent them, or, when you're in that kind of like transient lifestyle and you have places that people can stay, like that was the thing. And started doing that. And then also got into the Airbnb and then property management. And then I started I partnered in a financial consulting firm. So anyhow, I like suddenly discovered I have like 5 different businesses going, and I'm doing this coaching thing.
That's awesome.
And yeah, and I really I love having different projects, and I love connecting with people and learning about what they do. And I just have this, I don't just see like the holes and how to fill them, but I see all of the different patterns, and I can see like the 18 different paths. I think that's like, my undiagnosed ADHD. It's like watching all the TV channels at once, but I can see like the choose your own adventure plot lines in all of them as well. And so that's been really fun for me in terms of business and leadership, and how can we create this new world that we don't know I think we can see it, but we don't know exactly how it works yet. So we're still using all the old systems and structures and expectations, but like they're fucking broken. And it's like, how do you weather the storm? How do you deal with the heartbreak? How do you deal with the disappointment? And like it can feel like a constant battle. But when we reframe it, like this is just a game, and have fun with it. And what if, what I started to do in like the worst, especially the last couple of years, when there's been some just obviously really, really bad shit that's happened. It's like when you're in it, you can't see what's on the other side of it. And it's not appropriate to either. Like you know, that's the spiritual bypassing or whatever, is when you're just like, I'm just going to skip to the end here. And kind of like what you were talking about with manifestation, like it's all good. And it's like, well, no, it's not fucking all good right now. Like I just lost everything, or I just lost my home, or I just lost this relationship, or this business just crumbled, or, but I do know in those moments, I can't see it, but it's going to make for like a badass story, potentially a really funny joke one day. And what if I could just trust, like, this is that part in the hero's journey. Like this is that part where the, you know,
The
foes,
abyss. Yeah.
the abyss. And like, you're just here. And instead of making it like a huge drama, or any, again, like that story that you tell yourself, like, this is the end, you're failing, you're never, the amount of times in music that I was like crumbled on the floor, ugly crying, and like telling everybody, like, this is the end of my career. Like I could never repay this, you know, expense, or I could never make up for this mistake, or like, funny to me now. I can look at those versions of myself and be like, wow, you were such a drama queen.
I can so
But
relate
they're like
to
really
that.
cool stories now, you know?
Oh, I can so relate to that. And that's great. I love your approach. I found, you know, kind of something similar, because when we started doing the Airbnb thing, some friends of mine in Atlanta were just goofing, and they just put like these giant teepees in their yard and put it on Airbnb as a joke in like 2015 or 16 or something like that. So they wound up paying their mortgage off with those things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it was like, what? So when I realized that was actually my sister was going to move in here, and then she got another job. So she was like, I'm peacing out. And I was like, oh shit, what am I going to do? So it was really just kind of an opportunity out of necessity, born out of necessity. But I love the way that you are like, oh, this is a business. You start out with the thing for free and just kind of see if it works. And now you've tested it. And then now all of a sudden people are like, wow, this is valuable. You know, you deserve to make money. You're not coming with some crazy scheme to try to make a business that's going to make $1 million or whatever. You're like problem solving in the moment.
Well, and like, not to, I mean, to interrupt you, but also like full permission to contradict yourself. Because although Airbnb was amazing and property management and rentals, like on the other side of 2020, when none of my people could pay rent, or I had these Airbnb people who were refusing to pay and claiming to be first responders, but half of my family are first responders in those areas, and they were like, they don't work with us. I realized like this model is part of the system that I think is broken, but yet I am engaging in it. And so I like pulled out of all of that, and like, I am now feeling the repercussions of essentially, like I completely reacted in that moment. And like, I sold my house, I sold out. I eventually ended up selling out of like all of the properties, and like stopped doing Airbnb altogether. And now I'm like, oh, that cash flow, remember that? Like that was like what gave you all the space to play. And it like I know that there's a better model, and I haven't exactly figured out what that looks like. I have some ideas just in terms of like blockchain and crypto, and how we could create like properties that are more self-sustaining in terms of the people that are staying there are also part owners in it. And it's not some like hippie rah-rah, communal living experience, but it's this idea that if you're paying into something, you should also be benefiting from it. And it should not just be one person who takes and everybody else who gives. That feels very out of balance to me now. And also, like, there are people that are more inclined to take than give, or give than take. And so how do we create balance in that as well? So I like I've the amount of businesses that I've started or saved or led, and getting into them, and then a few years later being like, okay, this isn't it anymore. And I absolutely 100% went all in on this. And, you know, I set the goal, I achieved it, and it's not what I expected. And that's okay too.
Yeah, that's because there's no, it's like we were talking about earlier. There's no point where it's like, oh, well, I don't know, everything's fine now. I don't have any problems anymore.
Yeah.
No, like the more that we succeed or get closer to our goal, there will be new problems all the time. They're constantly, it's just what quality of problem do you want to have? Do you want to have the quality of problem where, you know, you're writing a check for a gallon of milk for 50 cents? Or are you, looking to have the type of problem where it's like, I just lost 50 grand, pass the ketchup,
Yeah.
like,
Well, and it's like, be okay to talk about the problems. Like one of the things we were talking about before is like this like concept of new world, new business, and like, the patriarchy and colonialism and capitalism. Like it's all about expectation. And like time and scheduling and plans and deadlines and structure and systems feels very old world, but it gives us this opportunity to like intersect. And I see so many like woke AF motherfuckers who, if you disagree with them, like you might see a little less wokeness out of them. And it's like, how can we still hold space, to use that languaging, but it's like both ends of the spectrum. And so like the problems are just like, oh, we've just discovered that something we expected isn't what's happening. So firstly, can we create a space that we actually have the agency and privilege to acknowledge that? Like, I can't, like the amount of people that I work with, when you bring up the fact that something isn't going the way that we expected, they take it like the story they tell themselves is you were attacking them and you were criticizing them. And then you get this like retaliation. And it's like, no, dude, like a year ago, we engaged in like an agreement, AKA a contract or some type of like working exchange here. And things have just changed. And like what I expected or what I was told, or that older version of you and that older version of me that came to this agreement, like something different is occurring here. And I think like that with like, yeah, what kind of problems do you want to have and how do you want to feel about a problem? And is it, that was like my biggest in my coaching, there's this whole like framework, and as there usually is. And one of the biggest challenges for me was this idea that like I was a problem solver. I literally, like, if you got my business card anytime in the 2000s, my self-imposed job title was problem solver,
AKA
or like the
worker.
fixer. Yeah, it was more like the Pulp Fiction, like fixer,
Right.
cleaner. But yeah, but what I realized and what was pointed out to me is like when you're filtering the world for problems, you're coming in as the judge. And then when you're the one that has all of the solutions, now you're the jury. And if it's your job to then solve all of the problems, you're also the executioner. And I had no interest in playing any of those roles. But yet, like, if I'm defining something as a problem, I'm inherently judging it. And when we can play with this, like, what if this isn't a problem? We get ourselves out of this binary that I think is the system, where there's one right way, one wrong way, one better way, one worse way, one right way, like, and it's like, I mean, if we've also been doing anything over these last few years, it's realizing like everything is on a spectrum. There is no binary, but so often people want to push you to either be like one thing or the other. And like, this is where I both struggle and appreciate like online communication, because it is in the polarization that you compel people to like take a stance. And knowing that like that's why so many people are putting out such outlandish opinions, is so that you engage with it. Because otherwise you're just like endlessly scrolling and just kind of like consuming whatever information is out there. But when they make you stop and go, no, that's fucked, or like, oh my God, I love that. Again, it helps you understand, like, how do you feel about a problem? How do you feel about a win? Like what even makes it one or the other for you? And then how do you want to, like, I just think it's so important when we start to like really tune into like, how do we feel about this? Like, is it a problem? What if it's not? And you don't have to even believe that, but what if this is all happening for a reason? Like, what if this is actually cool? And somewhere down the line, we get to see why. We just can't see that right now.
Yeah, that's really, really good. I think there is that, like, I love your approach with the balance of it, because from the problem solving perspective, of course, we think of business, old world, as basically like a bunch of people who are trying to exploit people or sell a bunch of crap. You read like propaganda from like 1926, like, we have warehouses of shit we need to get rid of. We got to teach these people to be consumers now. And that's kind of what business turned into, as opposed to, maybe from a very organic level, hey, I can help you with that, and that's valuable to you, whatever that sort of thing is. So going through and just customizing it and being really fluid with the possibilities, the options, and all that kind of stuff. I think super helpful. And then changing that perspective, like talking about the hero's journey and seeing yourself as a character. Take yourself out of the body and see yourself on that circle of the hero's journey where you're going into the unknown, and then you're going to come back and learn a lesson, and and kind of come back around full circle and have integrated that. Now you have a story to tell and you can help other people. But that whole experience is incredibly valuable and useful if you can view yourself from a little bit of afar, because it's like, okay, this is part of this hero's journey. They have to go through the abyss. They have to face death or whatever the difficulty is. Without that, the story doesn't even work. So if you can see yourself from that outside perspective a little bit and understand your character, your avatar, and your role in that movie, well, then now you can kind of emotionally create a bit of a buffer between yourself and the circumstances that you're experiencing. It's like, okay, I'm this character in this movie, and I'm this very specific character, right? Like you're Nicole BZ. You're not, Robin Hood or Cinderella. You've got your own specific avatar, your own specific journey, and part of that whole process that's very unique to you. So if we can start to see ourselves as like that character that's in there, then I think it gives us a lot of power and leverage to be able to weather those funky storms and have that bit of space where we can be like, all right, I'm overwhelmed. This sucks. Okay, I'm going to take a minute. I'm going to give myself lots of time and space, maybe talk to some other people. And instead of just being like, this is a problem and it's just going to be terrible and freaking out and all those types of things, which I think really, really sabotage us, that propensity, which I definitely have had to work on a lot, of just going down the downward spiral when one thing goes the way I didn't want it to, even though that may actually be the universe bringing me to my goal even more swiftly than I had anticipated. But then you freak out and then just have a conniption fit, and now all of that energy and momentum is kind of wasted because you freaked out over that one thing. But for me, it's helped to like see me as that character. It's like, okay, this is this guy, he's doing this thing. And what that helps with is like specifically difficult challenges or things that are boring or mundane. Going to an open mic, there's two sort of ways to experience that. I go to an open mic, I'll hear a bunch of comics that are working out material. They're not very good, whatever. I'm in this experience. I go up there, I do the same thing. Well, I can go up there, say my shit, get in the car and drive away and say, these people are idiots and they're stupid and I hate them or whatever. Or I can be like, this is fun. Like how unique and interesting is the experience that I'm having, being able to watch this person bomb, and they may have a Netflix special in 5 years, but I get to watch them bomb, meet them, experience this. And the more that I feel like the more that I experience it through a sort of positive lens and enjoy the things that are great about it, the more that elevates my sense of reality, the more that also makes the consequences or the situations that I'm going into better. And it's like this a little bit elevating, just trying to appreciate those times. And it's even possible to like have a lot of gratitude and excitement when you're in the middle of that storm. If you can have enough self-awareness. It's not easy, but if you can do that, like, holy shit, my friend Janine is like, that's when you are creating new timelines. You don't even know it. But like in those really turbulent moments, it's kind of like whatever you choose in that turbulent moment, that's really going to be, solidified. If you're like, this is just the worst, it's not going to work out. And then you give up on it. Well, it's done. It's over. You've given up on it. Or if you're like, you know what? I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to suspend my disbelief and try to give myself some space and try to even enjoy this funkiness because we don't get it. We don't get it again. So like back to the idea of presence, it's like, well, it's a very unique experience and it will make a fabulous story down the road. So yeah, so there's a balance with that whole, just emotional relationship to our circumstances and to our story that we get to tell and define. So I guess I'm making that point a little bit, but I'd love to get into really quickly what your thoughts are for somebody who is wanting to expand and do more their own thing, whatever that is, and what you might suggest. Because we were talking a little bit about how we're doing our own thing. We're not necessarily following a template. There are templates, and I see a lot of that, and I feel like that's a very old world. Here, do exactly everything I did, and copy and paste it, and then you'll have what I had. But that's so generic. It's like from a comedy perspective, if I try to be Rodney Dangerfield or Jerry Seinfeld, then I'm never going to find my voice in my own unique way. There are many paths to the top of the mountain, and each one of us has our own. It's not going to be like anybody else's journey. So as far as for anybody who's like, you know what, I want to do my own thing, or I'm starting to do my own thing, or working with some friends or whatever, but really defining themselves and looking to go into and be a little bit more self-reliant or an entrepreneur in some capacity, I'd really be interested to hear your thoughts as far as like how you would kind of start them out on that journey, or what advice you might have for them.
Well, I think everything you just said is so relevant, because ultimately what you're talking about is like pattern interruption. Is it's knowing like, oh, I've just started like on this spiral. And if I don't change, at least like the way I'm thinking, or even like what I'm doing, like it's just going to continue. And especially like the bad shit, the negative shit, like it is addictive. It is compounding. Like that's why we call it the spiral, the rabbit hole. Like once you start, and I think that's very similar when you realize, oh, I want to do something different. I like, first and foremost, because what I'm experiencing right now is like, can't be it. And we kind of start asking those questions, like, what if things were different? Or what if yeah, I had a $50,000 problem instead of a $500 problem. And that's like why I love business is, to me, it's the way you unplug from the matrix. And all like, I use words because, you know, we got to communicate some way. And like English is my most effective. But like, to me, like, potentially, I don't know, that's probably debatable. Business is just like what, like I've talked to thousands of people now. I volunteer, I've been coaching, but I mean, like working in the music industry and trying to get an artist, or like what would appear to be this like completely chaotic individual who has never had like responsibility to like be aware of like scheduling and performance and, you know, all of these like expectations. To me, business just means taking something seriously. And first and foremost, like you and what you want. And in business, you can be the king or queen or ruler of your kingdom. And that can look like a journal that you're writing in. It can look like an open mic stage. It can look like your own storefront or your own website or your own fucking empire. Like you get to make up those rules. And we don't get to do that in a lot of different places in our experience. And so to me, you know, why is it unplugging you from the matrix? Is it saying like, oh, like, you know, I know Kung Fu. Like I can just create whatever it is that I desire, and it gets to be exactly the way that I want it to be. And this is me contradicting myself, because I used to rally against like, why am I the anti-business business coach? Because the systems and the like the templates and like the magic, you know, bullshit that everybody's doing, like it works. It works in attracting someone to buy, because we're like appealing to that fear and that desperation and that desire. And there's, you know, what are you buying? It's like a guarantee. And so in that like goal setting, if you've never done this before, if you feel like you don't have any money or you don't have any experience, or, you know, you're a corporate refugee, or potentially you're like the true artist and creative who's always rallied and rebelled against structure or systems, like a template can be useful, but it's not a be all end all. It's just one place to just start. Maybe please don't invest like, you know, don't believe the hype. Spending a shitload of money on something, or especially like your last cent, or quitting your day job to like commit wholly to something, that works for some people. Some people need to burn it all down in order to like start their own fire. Most of us like a little bit of security, and more importantly, confidence. And so like to the person who's just getting started, or who's wondering like, is it time to like quit the day job or like burn it all down and like go all in? You get to answer that. You get to test it. you get to fail at it. You get to try again. You get to walk away. You get to come back. Like that's to me, that's what business is it's freedom. And it's freedom to do it your way and to take you seriously. And I think like by giving yourself steps, like it's like Google Maps, like give yourself a fucking path and just see what happens while you're wandering down it. You might go completely off the rails and something amazing might happen. You might go exactly the way that it tells you to, at exactly the speed that it tells you to. And it's super boring and very not sexy. And you're on a freeway the whole time, but like you arrive safely and securely at your destination exactly when you expected. And that totally works too.
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes hand in hand with really just finding, your niche, your gift, the thing that you can give the world to, because we're just peeling that onion back all the time, constantly, a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. And then you'll find the things just through going through that process, that template that resonate with you, that make sense with you. It's like finding a process in writing or art. It's like everything is going to have a structure. A story has a structure. You write something, you ignore the structure, it's probably going to be shit. It's probably going to be mashed potatoes. Nobody's going to really relate to that. But that doesn't mean you can't work outside of templates and be more creative and abstract. But if you notice, like every joke has a structure, or every story has a structure, every song has a structure, it doesn't mean that you can't bend those rules, but you gotta have them. You got to understand them a little bit. So I agree with you. And that's part of that 1 foot in one world, 1 foot in another.
Yeah.
Opening up to this infinite amount of possibilities, the vastness that you are, and how you would approach a problem as opposed to somebody else, and the different solutions you might come up with, their angles or perspectives on it, versus just the generic kind of thing. But I think you make a great point where it's like, don't be afraid to take something and, put it into action. You don't need to spend $1 bajillion. I couldn't agree with that more. It's really
well, but like you also deserve to like get the help that you need. And so for me, I'm always accountable to others more than I am myself. I used to like have so much guilt and shame around that, and thought like, if I really wanted it, if it was really important to me, like I'd do it for me. And it's like, I wouldn't even like take a shower or get dressed if like I didn't have to. Like so like for me, having somebody that I'm accountable to, like I did it all by myself for like 11 years and it was brutal. And I self-medicated. I went through significant mental health crises. Like I had 2 massive breakdowns. And like I talked to these entrepreneurs and business owners of like global, 100 million, $1 billion companies. They've lost homes, they've lost marriages, they've lost relationships with children, they've lost they've gone bankrupt multiple times. And like bankruptcy means someone else is not getting paid. Like in music, you see this all the time, like with festivals and all sorts of things. Like it's some like contractor supporting their family who gets fucked. And like I get like, fucked in blah, blah, blah. It's not like everything else just as black and white as being like, well, I'm not paying for this, but I digress. Figuring out like what you do need to be successful, because we all hate sucking at something. Like, and I find it like it blows my mind every time I talk to people, especially in like my like volunteer work, like how surprised they are that it's going to be hard starting something new. And they like, we just, especially if you've built success, especially if you're ambitious, especially if you're creative, like this idea that you're not just going to be amazing at it out the gate, even though you love it, even though you're passionate at it, or even though you're like really wanting to help and be in service, it stops 80% of us. Like you always hear this stat, like 80% of businesses fail. Having been in like the industries that applies to, they don't fail. People give up, and like no judgment in that. Like they give up because they're done. They ran out of money. They ran out of hope. They ran out of support. They ran out of belief. And so that's one of the reasons, like, why am I doing this? Like, why do I love business? And like, why do I think business is the answer to freedom? Like, we all talk a lot about like the way things are and how fucked it is. But like, to me, by carving out your own like path and finding community, like the most powerful part of those systems or those gurus or those templates is you're typically in a space where there's other people trying to do it too, so you can connect with those people. Or you're working with someone who is potentially teaching you or consulting or pretending they're a coach or whatever, and like you can build a relationship with that person. Like obviously after like accountability, relationship is super important for me. But again, some of us just need to like get pointed in the right direction and then they go. And there's a book that I'm going to be doing on my quantum business book club called The Human Fabric, but by I always butcher his name, so I'm not even going to try. But it's about like how we as people, like we're all cut from the same cloth, but there are things that drive us differently. For some of us, it's being the evangelist, like the PR person. For some of us, it's being the resource, like the absolute expert. For some of us, it's being like the connector, the person that's like always, it's like, oh, not just like I know somebody you need to know, but like I have an idea or a solution, or there's this event, and kind of understanding like how you work and how you will push through the tough stuff, what you need ready, whether it's like, some warm soup on the stove or a good night's sleep or a friend that you can call that's not going to talk you out of the crazy idea. Like that's been for me, for someone who didn't even know I needed help, let alone how to ask for help. And then like what I should ask for, finding people that I perceived as being really amazing at what they do. And like, I don't like a lot of these people, I don't know them. Like when I was first starting out in music, I remember it was like that whole concept of like avatar design or like character design. And this was like 2000. Well, when I first started in music in Australia, 2004. And I had realized like, oh, actually by like meeting people and being cool, you're probably going to build a lot more success than just like sitting behind a desk. And so I found these different managers who were working with what I thought were really cool bands, and they were putting their bands in really cool places, and they were showing up and leading, they were being asked to speak and be on panels and being invited to like cool events and working with because like in the Australian and Commonwealth countries, they fund the arts, which they do here actually, but a lot of people don't talk about that. Different discussion. So anyhow, I found people that I thought were like doing it, not just like they were successful and had money. I actually have no idea how much money they had, but they were doing it in a way that I thought was like really awesome. And I like wrote down like what I thought was cool about them. And then I was like, okay, so what can you do to like build that up in yourself? Like, how can you be more connected? How can you be more like a better speaker? Still working on that one. How can you be like at the, be invited to the right things, or like, how could you get on a panel at a conference? And it really helped me understand what I need and like what I think success looks like what my definition of success is. And that's been a fundamental, like, not just offering or way that I want to show up, but to like also answer your question of how can someone who's getting started or who's really ready to kind of go all in on this thing, it's like define what success means for you, and also like understand what happens when you fail so that you can get to that definition of success, knowing like you're gonna fall down, like probably a lot. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a good thing because it's uncomfortable. No. It hurts. It sucks. It's like you said, like
it's the pointing and laughing at you part. Like I was thinking about Sybil, like they're all gonna laugh at you. You're just like, yes, they are.
Yeah, it really it is. It's brutal. I mean, it really is. But if you can go through that and go all the way through the dip, you will eventually. You'll figure it out. But it's just ugh, yeah. It sucks to suck. I mean, that's just the truth of it. Nobody wants to be at the level where, I mean, nobody wants to be at the level where they are anyway.
How did you get back on stage after the first time you bombed? How did you even know you were bombing? I know that's probably obvious, but just so our listeners can really get into it with you.
Yeah. So the second time I did comedy, I thought I bombed. And really, it wasn't that I bombed. I went to an open mic where a bunch of people were trying to eat pizza with their family. and
Right.
nobody listened to me because they didn't want to be bothered. You know, there's
Yep.
so many of these just incredibly
The story you're telling
uncomfortable,
yourself. Yeah.
awkward, you know, mics, you know, where people don't even know. It's like pop-up comedy and you didn't even know they were having a show there at this pizza place or whatever. And these people are just like, please stop talking about your undercarriage, you know, for like 20,
Like,
20
enough
seconds.
with the manscaping.
Yeah, dude, you know, exactly. And it's like, so I went up there and I just afterward, I just felt so rejected. It was like being rejected by every, you know, former partner I've ever had all at once. And I just went, I have the video somewhere still on my phone of like doing like a little like video vlog or journal or whatever. I'd never shared it out, but, or at least not yet,
Have
but
you
I
watched
just
it
felt,
recently?
I haven't watched it in a long
You
time.
did. When you
I'm like, it
edit
feels
this, go
so
back there and
bad.
watch it. I'd love to
Yeah.
hear.
At
Yeah.
some point I will, for sure. I've kept it. So it's at least there, but it's like, I felt so, I felt so dejected, rejected, and just like uh, terrible, just terrible. And yeah, so, but that's part of, that process. And that's what they tell you, you know, it's going to take years to figure this thing out. Don't be in a rush about it. And I thought, I could do this. It's easy. Not easy, but it's, you know, I can do it faster than everybody else. I have previous experience doing music or emceeing or whatever. And all those skills do ultimately help, but it's not the same. They don't always transfer over, at least not the way that you might think that they would. So, you know, for me, after that, it was terrible. I bombed more or less for like a year. And I think most comedians would have a similar story to that, where it's like, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what's funny. You can't be present. You can't understand what's going on in the audience and remember your material at the same time, because comedy is a conversation. It's a very one-sided conversation, but it's a conversation. What's happening in the room is important. And if you can't key on that while you're thinking of the next thing to say, then you're not going to be a great stand-up. But you have to develop both of those aspects, right? And so one of the things I'm going to start trying to do is there's this mic that I just found out about, where it's basically, they really prefer crowd work. You got to go in there and be fast, you know? And so a lot of these open mics, it's just 10 comedians that showed up to go to the open mic. So you don't do crowd work on another comedian. That's rude. So you don't get that opportunity. And so a lot of these folks who are well-known, developed, they've had that practice. They practice that skill. They know how to be funny in the moment and to goof around in crowd work, and they've developed that skill. So that's one of those missing pieces that, you know, if you want to have the full range, you want to be able to do that. You want to be able to be in the moment. But those things take time. It takes time to remember. My friend Carlos Valencia is one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life. It took him 5 years to really be able to speak on stage. Everybody has a different challenge that they're facing. For him, it was stage fright, just speaking in front of people. Well, it wasn't really that for me. I still get nervous to speak in front of people, but my challenges have been different. And so I'm trying to address those specifically and individually for myself, so that I can, develop the strengths that I feel like I need to have to be have a complete act and feel comfortable and confident in that. But the confidence wavers too, sometimes I'm super confident and I tell corny jokes and they work. And sometimes I'm, not confident and I tell great jokes and they bomb. So that has a lot to do with it as well. And I mean, I got the date on the calendar. Like, I can't bitch out. I got to go. Sometimes I don't feel like being up there. Sometimes I don't want to be here right now.
Yeah.
So, but that's part of it too. It's like, whatever it is that you're trying to do, trying to learn, you just got to give yourself that space and that grace and be able to allow yourself to fail and try not to beat yourself up too badly about it, because that's really the hardest thing is, I think a lot of us are our own harshest critics, and you feel inadequate. You see somebody else doing something, but you don't realize that they have many more years in the game or different skill set than you did or whatever. And so it's really hard to not compare yourself to. It's like back to that template thing. It's like, well, I need to be like that. But it's like, no, you need to be able to get that effect, but not necessarily by doing it how they're doing it. You need to find your own way to do that same thing, to get that same result, but your process is probably going to be a little bit different. It's going to, you're going to have to tweak different things. So it's been a journey, and it's one of those things where sometimes I just want to give up. I know a lot of people do, but I can't, and so I make that as a joke. I'm like, well, let's just quit. And then we all laugh, like that's my big joke when I'm talking to any of my friends, like, let's just quit. It's whatever. But then what am I going to do? I'm going to be bored in 20 minutes after I quit, whatever the thing is. So, putting out content and doing all the posting and doing the Instagram and the podcast and all this stuff, I enjoy it, but there's still aspects of all of that shit that sucks, and there's plenty of issues with writing. I don't want to write, or I don't want to go up. Like last night, I was like, I'm just going to lay on the couch, and you got to be able to do that too, and disengage once in a while too, because you can become that slave driver and burn yourself out, or really, set yourself back. I think if you don't allow yourself to live life, having another foot in the other world too. There's so many comedians. It's like all they do is just comedy. And so they live in this very myopic, teeny tiny world. And then they start writing jokes about doing comedy, or about being in the car all the time on a plane. And they tell you, like, when you start writing jokes about being in the car or on a plane, that ain't it. You got to get out there and actually live life. So it's about balance. I really have learned a lot about that particular process and processes all together through doing this. And it's definitely challenged my capacity to be patient, but
what you just shared is what I love to sort of analyze, is like the energy behind everything that we do. And like what I just heard was like practice. We've practiced like bullying ourselves and being like the slave driver and the bad boss, and comparing ourselves and, feeling shit like a lot. And we don't like feeling like that. That's when like, the evil boss shows up and it pushes you to this place of like, to just keep going, and then you get a result. But like playing with that energy of going, well, let's just quit. It kind of neutralizes it. I find when we give ourselves permission to just walk away, whatever that means, like it pattern interrupts, and it disrupts what was that spiral.
Yes.
And then we can kind of like play with something else, and we can tune into, well, like, I get to do all of these things, and it gets to be really creative. And like there's parts of it that suck, but what do I want to choose to focus on? And it's this like continual sort of like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, and just really playing with the energy behind what we're doing, why we're doing it, what we think it's going to do for us, and how will that make us feel. And giving ourselves really good material to write about.
And that's a really positive thing. It's like, no matter what it is that happens, there's a story there, whether you're a comedian or not. Those are leveraging experiences that can be very helpful to other people. That's the thing that the hero brings back, is the story at the end of the journey, which can help other people avoid the mistakes that they made, right? And like understand the struggle,
or like integrate the information.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Like I used to wonder, like, what do I need to say to people to help them avoid burnout? And then I realized, there's nothing. There's like, all you're here for is when they're like, oh, that didn't work. How do I do something different when I have no idea what that different thing is? That's where your influence or support or problem solving or whatever it is can come in. But you're not like, the hero isn't necessarily here to save the world. They're here to be available when the world's like, fuck, we've really messed up this time. And we've done this a lot. So like, can you help?
Yeah. And I love that too, where you're talking about like sort of breaking that hypnotic rhythm and getting out of that, because it's so easy to just get, it's like, I watch one YouTube video and then another one. Like, so that's that rhythm. If you can just get up and run around the house, or like splash some water on your face, or, whatever it is, to kind of break yourself out of whatever, whatever autopilot that you're kind of on, going to write, just even if it's a page, or start something for 2 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever. And that has helped me too, not to have like crazy expectations, like I'm going to write all day or whatever. It's like God, and writing comedy is maddening. I mean, if you want to attain enlightenment, I recommend sitting down at a desk for an hour and trying to write a joke, because your whole mind will just go
Yeah, I have no concept of how to do
dead
it.
space.
Like,
It's like,
absolutely. Like you were talking about it earlier, the idea, I was like 0 days old and I realized they've rehearsed this. Like, this isn't just completely on the, like, they're telling the same jokes every night. Like, what? Like, they've tested what's funny based on if people laughed. And then they repeated that one. Like, I was like, oh my God, okay, wow.
And they've done it so many times that it seems like they're doing it for the first time. And that's the paradox, it's like, oh my gosh. Like my friend James, the Sonic Portal, he is also a comedy writer. He's mostly like a screenwriter, though. He doesn't do stand-up proper, but he's got, sketches, and his screenplay is excellent. But that was one of the things for him. He saw George Carlin 2 nights in a row, and it was the same set, and he was just so bummed. He thought, like I did, like you did, that he was just went up there and went into a diatribe. But no, this dude, so calculated, so precise, so perfect. And you see that too with like Bill Burr and, well, many other comics. Anybody who's great, name your favorite comic. But you'll notice like little things too, and you start paying attention about the specificity of words they're using, right? Like, it's funnier if he says, not car, but hatchback, or, like these, the more specific it is, usually the funnier the response, the more people find it funny, and little things like that. And so we're constantly just tweaking the stuff, tweaking them into like the manscaping bit, right? Like that was one of the first things that I ever wrote, but it took me a couple of years to really make that whole thing work all the way around. And, at first it's a joke starts out and it's just a premise. Like you have an idea. Like I was pitching to you before we like started getting on to talking about the beard or whatever. And it's like, well, I haven't found the thing that really works yet, but if I just keep going, keep drilling down into it, I find that going into the depth of the idea is more important than the breadth. Like you don't necessarily need to have a lot of topics, but the further you can go and drill down into that idea, the more likely that you are to hit gold somehow.
Well, and that, like, honestly, like that's the trick to business as well, is double down on what's already working. And like as a creative, which is an entrepreneur, like you're like addicted to the ideas, and like you like all of the different ideas. And I call it like the squirrel cage, like capture them, put them in a cage, but then like come back to the thing that's working. And when you can perform it like in front of any audience on demand, no matter how you're feeling, like that idea is solid. Now introduce the next one and start playing with that. But yeah, I think we're so tempted to think something's not working because it didn't pop off immediately. And that's just that, like, again, why do 80% of businesses fail? Because they're constantly like trying something new. And like, I do believe in pivoting, which is contradictory to what I've said in the past as well, but it's a plan. Like we're not reacting in the moment. Like we plan on iterating and improving. That's like design theory, where like you have an idea, and if you hear me say anything over and over and over again, it's test it. So like, yeah, pick a target, try and hit it, see what happens. What did we learn from that? Take one thing, apply it to the exact same like point of inception, and then do it again and do it again and do it again until you could do it in your sleep. You could teach somebody how to do it. You could do it anywhere and you know it's going to work. Then introduce something else. And it's like boring. I heard someone say that very recently. It's not, money or like success that kills entrepreneurs. It's boredom, because it really is. It does take time. And it's interesting that you said 5 years earlier, because I'm noticing that, with like 25 years of 2020 hindsight. And I never want to tell anybody how long something should take, nor do I ever want to tell them to be patient, because it's just not for me to have that judgment. But what I am noticing is there's something magic in that 5th year that happens. And I've seen way more businesses blow up, or bands or artists of all mediumships, like implode because success hit them in that first or second year, and they just were not ready for it. And it's not like not ready for it, like they freaked out and had, like spun out or had some like massive public thing, just that like the systems weren't in place. Like they couldn't take advantage. Like when that spotlight shone on them, like they were busy like side of stage, giving someone a hug. Or, like that's a weird analogy. But the point being, like, you want all your ducks in a row. You want to be ready for it. You want to be practiced. You want for when they call your name and you go up on stage, like you smash it out of the park. And yeah, like you're ready for what happens next. And I do think that takes time. I don't know, like, again, I don't think there's a specific number. And potentially it's like acquiring like a certain frequency that you can just like turn on and tune into on demand.
Sure.
But I am noticing like 5 years, at least in this physical experience, seems to be this like magic number.
Yeah, no, that's so good. Because part of it, and back to Stephen Pressfield, he's like, enjoy your time not in the spotlight.
Yeah.
Because you have all this time, and if you can build those systems and the process, and you continue, because like I imagine for people who they get success in their first or second year, they haven't necessarily developed whatever that practice is to continue to make fire. Like they made fire and they got lucky making fire. Good for you. Nothing wrong with that.
Albums. Yeah.
Great. Congratulations. But if you don't have, like, you can tune into that frequency and just make fire. That's finding your voice, or, finding that thing that is testable and repeatable, whatever that is, then you're doing that in the background all the time. And people don't see that. You don't see how much private, work goes into public victory, because it's just, but once you have that process in place and then you have some success, you're like, okay, cool. And then you're keeping on going back behind the scenes and making the donuts or whatever. And now you have both of those things working at the same time, where you've got a process that works, you can make fire, and then you've got people that want to consume that or take it in or what have you.
Well, and so it's like, like figuring out how you do it. Also, like the joke, like, will you just quit? But I can't. Like the people that I know that are like, don't have to worry about things anymore, they couldn't do something else. Like they would have loved to be like a straighty 180, like on that, and like, I wish that I could do like the marriage and the mortgage and the kids and the half a dog and the, whatever that would, I think, make life a lot easier, but we'll never know. It's like they couldn't do something else. And I always say to people, if the idea doesn't go away, like if that squirrel's still in the cage when you go to it, like I think about like the Queen's Gambit. Apparently that screenwriter pitched it 100 times and started in the early 90s and was pitching it initially as an episodic television show to like NBC and CBS, because in the early 90s, that was TV, at least in the United States. And then, Netflix started in 1997, which I don't think anybody knows either. Like no one gave a shit about Netflix for a really long time.
Right.
And so like he kept pitching this and everyone was like, a show about chess? Like, no. And so it took not just this idea and not just this development, because then the writer started working with like that super famous chess player, and they iterated and they improved on the script. And then when the technology caught up, they started pitching, like, then they tried to make it a movie, and then they tried to make it like an independent film. And then again, they were like, this is too long and it doesn't. So they kept like chopping and changing. And then finally, like the stars aligned and the technology was there, and Netflix was producing its own material and was willing to invest in things. And like suddenly it became this amazing epic project. And everyone's like, oh, that was so rad. It was 20 years in the making.
Yeah.
And the dude heard no and like was still doing a lot of other things. And so not only, I think one of the problems was in, the early 90s, there was no credibility or clout or proof of work for this particular writer. But so they kept doing it and taking the day jobs and taking like the ghostwriting where they weren't going to get any credit to develop their craft and develop their skill and build the connections that they needed, so that when they were ready, when that spotlight shone, when they could get the funding that they needed to really pull off this project, Because I think there were a couple of like false starts, but it wasn't right. But then they had enough belief in themselves and confidence in that blueprint for their own success that they were like, well, just because we're getting a yes, it's not the right yes. And so it is nuanced. And I share that because one, I think it's just really important to remind yourself it's probably going to be 100 no's or 100 failures before you get the one yes. The first yes may not be the best yes. And you want to be fucking ready for that best yes. So you can like run with it and really leverage it for everything else that it's going to be able to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's easy to forget that part,
It's
but
like the easiest. It's so easy, especially when you're being told like no for the 99th time.
Right. Yeah. So, Tim Dillon comes to mind just as a comedian. I think he's super funny, but he was a New York guy for years and years and years, like 15, 16 years before he moved to LA. And even before that, he had an opportunity and Norm Macdonald was like, well, keep working on it. And he was like, what the fuck, man, I'm ready now, And if you hear him tell it, he's like, I actually did need more time. Yeah. And but by the time he was ready, man, he went out to LA, and at that point, the red carpets rolled out for him. You go out there too early or whatever, and people don't know who you are, you don't have a solid act or a bunch of different material, whatever, then you might have a terrible go at it. But I mean, if you go out there and you're ready and you have all your ducks in a row, well, then now it's going to be a lot easier to enter into whatever that whole thing is, Mm-hmm. But 16 years that's a long time, That's
Gay Hendricks wrote this book called Conscious Luck. He's written like 40 books or something like that. He's like one of the OGs. He was like a business coach and executive coach in like the 70s. And it was talking about like, because I always say like, I don't believe in luck. I think luck is preparedness meets opportunity. But what I loved about it was his play on time, because I am someone that's traditionally like moving pretty fucking fast. And I've got like a million different things going, and some people might perceive me as being spread too thin. You're just not a priority. But like, he like takes you through this example of like walk super fast. Like when you're like getting shin splints and you're like, you're doing that, like, what was that? Like the
power walking?
Well, but like did you ever see that YouTube, like where the lady in the park, if you haven't seen it, I'll send it to you. It's fucking amazing.
Send it to me.
But she's like full, like walking. But like, yeah, you almost feel like weird. You're walking so fast. And then he was like, now go like awkwardly slow, where people are like moving around you on the footpath or like wondering if there's something wrong with you. So obviously like going too fast, going too slow is not your right time, but there is a pace at which you move that will put you exactly where you need to be. And if you're rushing, you're going to miss it. And if you're going too slow, you're not going to be there in time. But like that, like, how do you cultivate luck? Like, how do you get to be one of those people? And like, this is what I actually love about the Love and Lighters is they're like in this blissful, the ones that are doing it in like true light, they're obnoxious because everything does work out for them. Like they don't have to worry about rent or money because they are just floating from like one free thing to another. And even when they get like kicked out because the person's like pissed off that they took advantage of them, like they're just like love and light and bliss. And then they like float on to the next thing and like everything works out for them because they truly believe everything is going to work out. Like when how does a con artist get away with it? They believe their own bullshit. Yeah. And like, so do we then, because we so desperately just want something to believe in, but I digress. The point being, like, when you can find that speed at which you're moving at a pace that is supportive, but also like noticeable, you're not just like going super slow and like expecting everything to just happen around you. You will start to cultivate what feels like luck, what feels like being at the right place at the right time for the right connection with the right conversation, with the right outcome for the right amount, because you're trusting the movement. And that's like what I'm really playing with. I've been in this like hardcore, like, fuck the system, but like you need a system, and but it's your system, not their system. And you don't do it more like you. And I'm sort of moving into this idea of like the business evolution, and that like in terms of entrepreneurship and really letting like your heart lead you, or spirit, source, universe, Mama Earth, like intuition, your guides, however you want to think about it, like letting that energy lead you. And it doesn't happen on like this space-time continuum. And so how do you get into agreement or exchange? How do you get hired or hire someone if like you're just tripping the light? Fantastic. And I think it's a really interesting, it's an interesting conversation that we get to have. And by simply bringing awareness to like, this is how it's always been done. Therefore, this is what our expectations are likely going to be. So how can we create a place where it's okay and we actually celebrate the problems or the challenges? Because all that does is give us an opportunity to iterate and improve. And so like I have this conversation a lot with the people that I work with. Like, yeah, you agreed on something and it doesn't feel good anymore. That's awesome. So you either need to start charging more or start working less or making your deadlines like a little bit more like a penciled in instead of firm. And like, instead of planning everything, assuming you're going to get this deliverable, like why not wait to get the deliverable and then plan everything or whatever it is that's going to be like a system that works for you. But so like, most people want to talk about the money when they start in business, like how much I'm going to make and how many sales I need to get and what do I have to do in order to achieve that. And that's cool. But like the money doesn't get there unless you have the confidence, and the confidence doesn't get there unless you have the trust. And so that's what this like business revolution, I'm sort of playing with this. Like the first step isn't money, but I don't know how many people are going to want to buy that. we will test it and see, I'll report back. But it's really like this idea of trust. And then like in that idea of trust, how do we play with the time and the constructs and the system and the support in there, and to then get the result of this exchange that feels mutually beneficial and of enough value that you can keep doing it.
Yeah, that's really good. I think seeing problems as opportunities is really helpful for that, because I think a lot of people, that's when that thing happens, whatever the catalyst is. Like you hit the wall and you're like, but then you figure out the problem that a lot of people struggle with, and then you can help them solve their problems. And that's how potentially money might be able to come into that situation as well. But wow. I think we've gone, I planned on an hour and it's almost 2, and I could just keep talking.
I know, keep talking forever. I'm like crashing in like a friend of a friend's, and they were here for the first couple days. And because when I get into my like work vortex, I like will talk with my people, but I'm scheduling now. So I get to like just go like full creative. And so this poor person was like in my physical world. And I was like, you literally have to walk away from me. Just walk away while I'm talking. Like that's the only way to end this. Like save yourself.
That's awesome. It's awesome. No, I love it. I love it. I'm so glad that we have been able to connect, and
thank you for creating this. And I can't I had to stop asking questions because I was like, I can just ask all of this on my podcast. So I can't wait to have you.
Yeah.
Prepared for like the full comedian. Because I had a million questions that I was just taking notes on, so I'm excited.
I could talk about it forever, honestly. Like it's insanely boring how much I could talk about the process of comedy and not say anything fun.
I'm obsessed with people who are obsessed. I should have like the OCD podcast.
Right. Yeah.
It's like just 9 hours. It's just like a binge podcast.
Yeah, that'd be great. So I'll have your links in the show notes. Anything particularly you want to share or ask people to check out?
Thank you for asking. The only thing, you shared the socials. I'm kind of, I will have lots of new things happening, but like I've just opened my own Discord container. Cool. And so I'll send you that invitation as well. That's where I'm really playing right now, and with all sorts of different things, and kind of sharing, because the other thing that I love about business is like, I was just saying this, I did this whole like recession video because I think the recession is bullshit, but more on that in the video. Like everything I talk about, you can Google it. Like it's like the systems, the structures, the spreadsheets, the budgets, like the marketing plans, the templates, like it's all online for free. But most people are like bored senseless by it because it's boring as fuck, or they aren't going to do it because they're afraid of something or resistant of something. And so it's like in that energy that you can really explore, like what is keeping me from taking this seriously, whatever it is. And so that's what, like, I'm trying to give all of what I think is like the very simple systems that everyone can use to be successful and just make that readily available. But it's the, if you're not taking those steps or doing the thing, why not? And then how can I support anyone who wants to like be a part of this and unplug from the matrix and find their freedom and enable other people to explore their own freedom and agency and privilege? Like, yeah, so that's, I'm playing with that all in the Discord, which we'd like literally, I think I started it a while ago, but I'm like, I am now taking it seriously as of this week. So yeah,
Cool.
I'll share that with you.
That's exciting. And is that something that I can share out just with the podcast?
Oh
or-
yeah, totally.
Okay, cool,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah.
All right. Well, I'll definitely share that as well. You guys check out all the cool threads in there. I can't wait to see that. And I love what you're working on. I definitely want to have
Thank
you
you.
back.
I love what you're working on too. I was, lightly stalking you, and from the trans surfing, I was saying, I don't even remember how I stumbled on that. That's what's kind of cool about like the art and the content, is it finds people exactly when they need it. Like I found that when I needed it. I think it was, I guess if it was 2018, for some reason I thought it was maybe like 5 years earlier that you put that out, but it doesn't even matter. Anywho, I'll let you end this.
No, that's cool.
Yeah,
No, that's fine. I started talking about it, or I made the audiobooks in like 2016 starting out.
Okay.
And then 2018, they were all out there by that point. And then I was on that, I was just on a different trajectory. Like that was when, like the year before that, or maybe two, I was just bartending. I had no idea what I was doing, no clue. And then I started doing the Airbnb thing. And then I started getting better production gigs. And then I became like a MGM producer and worked on some stuff like that. And also was producing those books. So kind of like all sort of congealed and kind of into one push. But yeah, that stuff, I mean, people have been talking about it for a long time, but there really wasn't a whole lot of resources when I started putting stuff out there, because I guess it was just not well known or whatever. And it was one of those things for me too, where it was like, I heard someone just barely just say the word transurfing in one of their videos. And I was like, I got to figure that out. And then I found it. And so I found the first book online for free and read and just consumed it. And I was like, I have to get all of these books. And then I read them all. And then I was like, I have to share these books. And at the time, then I was kind of conflicted about it. I was like, should I do this? It turns out I think it was the right thing to do. But anyway, that's where the story begins. But we can talk about that later. I'd love to have you come on. We'll do a panel sometime too.
Oh, I would love that. That'd be so fun.
Yeah, and do a live with some folks and talk about maybe some different ideas in business, and have some other like creative entrepreneur type folks on there. And maybe we can talk a little bit about crypto and stuff too.
Thank you so much for creating this. I am so honored, and like, you have no idea how stoked I am to actually be here. And I have so much reverence for people who have been doing this and putting themselves out there. The hardest thing I've ever done is like start a podcast. And so I appreciate you and your work and the community and the connections that you've cultivated that I've been able to find as a result of who you're discovering. So I don't want you to underestimate how fucking grateful I am, and how excited I am, and how just like, oh my God.
I feel the same way. No, I'm really excited to be able to chat with you and collaborate and just kind of see how things move forward. So yeah.
And I promise you, I'm going to work on my beard. Like,
yeah,
Jewish Polish heritage. I know it's a matter of time. And I feel like it's just a little less estrogen, which is going to be happening. My baba,
just drink lots of phthalates, and maybe get some chia seeds, just rub some
Apparently
cheeks.
Cannabis does a lot for testosterone. So,
That's interesting. I never knew that. That's pretty cool. Yeah, it's wild out there, all that stuff. And that's a whole other thing. But thank you so very much. I really appreciate it. I'm just as honored and excited. And I just love what you're doing. And I want to encourage everybody, go check out Nicole's stuff, Instagram, the BZ channel, NicolesBZ.com. I'll put all the show links in there. And of course, your podcast is the Everything podcast. So check all of that stuff out. I love your podcast. That was great.
Thanks.
So I encourage everybody.
I'm always surprised that anyone wants to listen to it.
And of course the Discord. We'll share that as well. And
thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody out there for tuning in for this one. I hope you got a lot out of it. let us know what you're working on. Let us know your
Please.
progress. We want to hear about it, and stay with it. Don't give up. It's okay to take a long time. Easy things don't take as long as
And
more
everybody's
difficult
doing
things.
them. You know, if you want to be average, do what everybody else is doing. Like, and there's no shame in the game. Go for average. That's cool, man. But
Sure.
like, yeah, don't follow the pack if you want to be out there trailblazing.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you again, and we'll see you all next time. Have a wonderful
Thank you.
day.